Word of advice: beware monsters and spoilers that lie ahead. Maegevannen, Kedmil, which means hello again in Sindarin and in another speech. This is the Tolkien Shed talking, and the finale of season 3 of The Witcher on Netflix is out, so it's time for a review. So, the season finale, how was it? I'll probably not surprise you when I say that there was even more of the boring and of the stupid. I might surprise you when I say that some things were improved, and that parts of those episodes followed the books quite faithfully and interestingly. Let's wait no longer and see what I'm talking about. At the beginning of episode 6, we see Geralt, who is forced by Dijkstra to observe what is happening. But what is happening? The Redanian intelligence and the mages that support them try to capture all the spies of Nilfgaard among the mages. Vilgefortz is their first target. Meanwhile, it turns out that Radovit's mission was to deceive Jaskier and to capture Ciri. As Radovit reveals that, he also says that his feelings for Jaskier were true, and he wants to prove himself worthy of his trust. By the way, Ciri disappeared, and she went to Thanet. Thanet is the island on which the conclave takes place. Then we see Yennefer. She escaped, took Geralt's sword, and went to the caves under the palace. There, Lydia, Vilgefortz's helper with characteristic earrings, tries to kill her, but Yen is saved by Triss, who for some reason was also in the caves. Back to Geralt, we see him in the hall where all the treacherous mages are gathered and tied up. We see also that Tissaia is free. Dijkstra wants to convince her that Vilgefortz is the traitor. We also see some additional forces coming to the palace. Dijkstra says that he called for reinforcements. But then Tissaia frees the imprisoned mages, believing that the accusations are not true, and a fight ensues. Dijkstra leaves, Geralt goes after him, and he heavily wounds the spy. Soon after, we see Vilgefortz, who reveals himself to Tissaia as the traitor. He opens a gate, and we see that the reinforcements are in fact elves and Nilfgaardians in disguise. They are led by Cahir and Francesca. Vilgefortz leaves, and Tissaia stands against the newcomers, and she is suddenly joined by the mages she freed, even though they had no right to know where to look for her, or that she was in danger. Then everyone, instead of fighting immediately, does epic poses, and then the battle starts. It is vital for the story that the elves have arrows made of Dwemer that are effective against magic. Effective until they aren't. They kill some mages, but then mages start deflecting them. Then Cahir leaves the battlefield and goes to look for Ciri. Speaking of her, she and Yen just meet outside the palace. They don't need to look for each other, it just happens. And now that they are together, it is time to discuss magic, because we need an explanation. Why not send Ciri somewhere safe? Yennefer does not do that, and in the books it is not so easy. There is a dangerous portal in Tor Lara, the Tower of the Gal on Thanet Island, that affects and destabilizes all the portals on the island. There is also a magical spell that prevents magic from being used at the palace. But in the show, magic is used all over the place. The portals are said to be too dangerous, but what happens in this episode disproves that. We are yet to discuss that. By the way, if the show followed the books and the mages weren't able to use magic, we wouldn't have to wonder how were they so close to losing the fight against few elves, and we wouldn't have to think about the consequences of arrows of Dwemer being so easy to use, because if they are so available, others can use them as well. And then mages would be an endangered species, but believe me, no one will ever use such arrows again. On a side note, Fringilla takes part in the battle on the side of elves, even though she has no reason to join them, no reason to know about the battle, and nobody expected her. I don't know where did she come from. Then Rin suddenly appears behind Yen and Ciri, and he attacks them. But then Geralt suddenly appears behind Rins, and he kills him. Geralt ex machina. And now that our heroes are together, there is no even a shred of reason not to escape the island. Why not use a portal? Nobody even asks that question, and there is no reason to stay there. Well, a reason for Yen will soon appear, but even then she could have sent Ciri and Geralt somewhere safe. Just saying. Oh, and when she goes to help Tissaia, she really has a long run to the palace. If only there was a way to travel large distances quickly. Just saying. In the chaos of the battle, Istred goes to Vilgefortz's chamber. He finds the Book of Monoliths, having no trouble discovering where it is hidden. Vilgefortz appears behind him and sends him somewhere through a portal, confirming that portals can be used and destroying any shred of leniency that I could have had for stupid decisions of Yennefer. So even if Philippa saying that she has to go further from Tor Lara to create a portal for Dijkstra will not convince me. Vilgefortz must think it is safe to use portals because he sends this extremely useful book through one of them. Back to Ciri and Geralt, Cahir stands in their way, but he does not want to fight Ciri. Instead, he asks her to kill him and forgive him. Before she can decide that, Skrtel appear and Cahir goes to fight them, and Geralt and Ciri escape. Then, back in the palace, Stregobor appears and he teleports. Or maybe he uses illusions? I don't know. So now time for a final battle against portals, my mortal enemy. Let's stillman the position of the portals in the story. Let's accept the proposition that Torlara makes the portals ineffective. Then let's accept that Vilgefortz could use different kind of power and that this different power is not affected by Torlara. And then let's accept the explanation that Stregobor does not teleport, but he uses an illusion to fool his enemies. It could be an explanation, but do you see a problem? Only one of those three vital pieces of information was presented. I have no idea what kind of power Vilgefortz uses. I have no idea if Stregobor used illusions. We only know that he sometimes does that, if we remember the first episode of Season 1. So even if this whole explanation is correct, I cannot know that from the show. I did the job that the show was supposed to do. Now once again we see Geralt and Ciri who are ready to leave in the boat. But then Geralt's medallion starts moving and he tells Ciri to go, and she does so. As Ciri goes to Torlara, Geralt finds Vilgefortz. After a short exchange of sentences, they start fighting. But Geralt is no match for the mage. He cannot even touch him. His signs are nothing compared with the might of magic. Vilgefortz parries every stride of Geralt's sword with his hardy stick. Vilgefortz defeats Geralt, breaks his leg and his sword. Geralt is left half dead. Then Vilgefortz goes to Torlara after Ciri. We see that inside Torlara there is a monolith. Ciri starts a sort of communication with this monolith. Suddenly there is a burst of energy, and Torlara crumbles and falls, revealing the monolith. Vilgefortz is hit by the shockwave, and Ciri is gone. Then Triss finds Geralt and says that she will take him to safety, and the survived mages who defeated the elves observe Torlara's fall. There are many flaws of this episode. One thing is that everyone finds everyone through the power of the script. And I cannot forget the funny bits during the fight in the palace. Especially the moment in which Cahir faces two mages who join their swords and find with this one big double-edged sword together. That's just gold. The show also misses some good opportunities. I really wish that the dialogue between Geralt and Vilgefortz was preserved in the show, but no, they just exchange a few sentences and start fighting. What's more, the show once again suffers from what it established or what it did not establish in the previous episodes, so Ciri deciding the fate of Cahir is not really meaningful because we have long forgotten about her trauma from Cintra. But in some places, this episode followed the books quite faithfully. I especially like the beginning of the coup on Thanedd, and I cannot say that it was entirely bad. Some of its flaws could be easily amended, so it really shows that there was potential here, even so far in the whole series. In episode 7, we see Ciri who gets teleported onto the desert. Then we see Jaskier who goes to ruin Aretuza, there he meets Radovid and learns what happened, and we learn that Nilfgaard started the second war against the Northern Realms. Jaskier also learns that Ciri is believed to be dead. Then we see Geralt in Brokilon, who was taken there by Triss. The Dryads try to heal him. Back on the desert, we see Ciri, who is traveling, and yeah, of course, she struggles. There's extreme heat, she has nothing to eat, nothing to drink. At one point, she is drawn by what seems to be a small pond of water. Suddenly, she sees a unicorn, then notices teeth around her, and in the last second, jumps out of a monster's mouth. Then she follows the unicorn, but he runs away. Soon after, the unicorn returns and leads her to water. Throughout the episode, Ciri sees visions of her mother, grandmother, and of Falka, a princess from the past who led a bloody rebellion in the north. Visions of the family try to convince Ciri that she is useless. Visions of Falka try to convince Ciri to use her powers in whatever way she likes, to change the world by burning whatever stands in her way. We also see a desert monster that attacks Ciri and the unicorn. It wounds the unicorn, then Ciri jumps on it, rips a part of its armor and smashes the head of the monster with it. Of course she does. Later, Ciri, under the influence of the visions of Falka, heals the unicorn using the dangerous and forbidden fire magic. Then, urged by Falka, she embraces the power of fire and sees visions of revenge on those who hurt her. But it gets out of control. In the vision, there appear more and more people who she exacts her revenge on, people she respects, people she loves. Jaskier, Yennefer, Geralt. Terrified by what she might become, Ciri renounces her powers. Then she falls unconscious and is captured and recognized by some people. And finally we see Jaskier going to Brokilon. He faces the Dryads, who kill almost all intruders, but he does not run, shows bravery, and sings to them a song they know, insisting on being taken to Geralt. Finally, they let him do so, and he brings Geralt the news. Apparently, Ciri is going to Nilfgaard to meet the Emperor Emhyr var Emreis and to join him in an alliance. This episode surprised me. I know that the main criticism it receives is that it is extremely boring, and I completely understand that. What happens in this episode can be summarized in 3 sentences. But I, personally, was somewhat interested in the details of what was happening. I don't blame anyone who was bored and just left, but for me, it wasn't so dull. First of all, it was following the books even more than the previous one. It introduced some changes, visions of Falka, but I don't dislike them, I think they are quite faithful. It would be hard to show the internal struggles of Ciri without an external point of reference. If she just talked to herself, it would be even more boring and lifeless. What works in the books would be hard to be shown on the screen. So here we are shown the figure of Falka, which will be important for Ciri's character in the future, and I like it. What I don't like is that Ciri very often tells us what she feels, and what we already know. We can see that she is desperate, hungry, terrified, thirsty, and exhausted, but she tells us anyway. What's more, her powers weren't properly established before, so now she gains this great power without any training and immediately renounces it. And I have one more piece of criticism that is hard to place because it concerns the whole part of this season, which is that we are not shown the second war between Nilfgaard and the Northern Realms. It would be so interesting to see the moves of the armies, the battles, the political intrigue, the chaos that follows the coup on Tanith, and the consequences of only a few mages surviving. But we see nothing of that. So perhaps this episode was the best place to show that, and then maybe it wouldn't be so boring. In the final episode, in Brokilon, we meet Milva, a human archer who lives among the Dryads. She is asked by Geralt to bring him news, but it is not easy. Geralt is still healing, he cannot even walk easily, but he wants to search Ciri anyway. As he tries to leave, Milva stops him. He's just unable to survive this journey. Then we see Yennefer, who visits Kraken Crate on Skellige Islands. The people of Skellige are looking for Ciri, but the news about Ciri going to Nilfgaard reach there. The political importance of Ciri is shown. If she will officially join Nilfgaard, many people in the north, including the people of Skellige, would follow her or at least not fight the Nilfgaardians. Back in Aretuza, we learn that apparently there are no more men among the mages. All of them were killed. So well, that's the way in which the Lodge of Sorceresses is created. There are just no sorcerers. Then, in Redania, Vizima decides to imprison Philippa to make an example out of her for the failures at Thanet. Then Radovid returns to the king's court, but he decides to leave to help Jaskier. But very soon, Vizimir is murdered on Philippa's order. And Philippa crowns Radovid as the new king of Redania. In Brokilon, Geralt is training, trying to regain his old proficiency, but he is still weak. Anyway, he decides to leave, but he is unable to walk long distances. He talks to Milva. It is revealed that she was a human girl who was supposed to be turned into the Dryad. It's a motive from the books, we have seen a bit of it in the first season, but the enchantment failed and she remained human. This part is added, it wasn't in the books, but it's not out of place. Once again in Aretuza, we see Yennefer who talks to Tissaia. Tissaia blames herself for many failures. Yennefer gives a speech about the importance of Tissaia in her life, about her strength, about who she truly is. And this speech was quite touching. But it was not enough to make Tissaia forgive herself for freeing the traitor and causing the deaths of so many. She lets Yennefer know that she will be alright, and then, left alone, she commits suicide. Soon after, Yennefer goes to Brokilon and meets Geralt. There she weeps for Tissaia. Geralt promises her that he will find Ciri, and then Yen promises to lead the mages in the fight against Vilgefortz. She also heals Geralt. In Nilfgaard, Francesca learns that Emhyr and Fringilla are responsible for her child's death, and she promises revenge. Soon after, Ciri arrives in Nilfgaard. Vilgefortz, scarred after the fall of Torlara, stands beside Emhyr. As the girl enters, we see that it is not in fact Ciri, but somebody very much resembling her, Teryn, the girl found in Vilgefortz's castle. From the reaction that we see, I cannot tell if the Emperor recognized that it was not his daughter or not. In the books it is clear, he knows that it is not Ciri. Here, I just cannot be sure. Then we see the real Ciri. She is captured and now held prisoner in a tavern. There is another prisoner, captured by somebody else, a young man. He is Kyle, one of the rats, a group of young bandits. Suddenly, the rest of the rats break in, kill the capturers, and free Ciri and Kyle. One of the rats is Mistle, who we have seen in the 4th episode for a short while, and she appeared in Gorsvelen. How did she get to the other side of the continent without a portal like Ciri did? Ask her, not me. One of the capturers of Ciri is left alive. The rats give Ciri an opportunity to fight him. She defeats him easily and kills him. Then we see Geralt, who embarked on his journey with Jaskier, and he fights some Nilfgaardians and forces one of them to go to Emhyr and tell him that he will not rest until he finds Ciri. And we see Milva, who decides to join Geralt. Finally, Ciri introduces herself to the rats as Falka. And so the season ends. And now some final thoughts. I feel as if those 3 episodes were different. They are by no means perfect, but a change is visible. They follow the books in many ways, and the changes that they introduce are, some of them at least, faithful in spirit. I will be honest, I'm curious what will come of this. Of course, we must remember that Henry Cavill is leaving the show and Geralt's role is recasted. So one of the best things about the show, and there aren't many, is leaving. But maybe there's still a bit of potential. Now some other observations and ideas. Maybe the season should have ended at episode 6. The next 2 episodes seem to tell the next part of the story that would fit better the opening of the next season. And the series would have ended on a nice cliffhanger. Geralt is wounded, close to death, Ciri disappears, and the mages are decimated. But if we had to watch those 2 final episodes, then we should combat the boredom that comes after the coup on Tanith, and we should be shown the war that is raging on. But we only hear about it. We only hear that Nilfgaard is winning in nameless battles with kingdoms that we have never visited. I also think that the episode should be more focused. There was something different about episode 6, and that was that it presented a story in one place at one time. The show had the problem of space and time from the beginning. I think that episodes would be much more easy to follow if they presented one story at one place at one time. But this episode 6 was a rare example of that. So, in the end, is there hope? Despite the fact that there are so many flaws, there is also a surprising amount to praise. After the first 2 seasons, I never expected the show to present events from the books so faithfully. But this faithfulness is relative. Maybe the show went so down below my expectations that when it began to climb to reach for the baseline for the most basic things, then I started to appreciate it. Maybe it was so, but I must be honest. I was ready to cast this show into the fire, to call it terrible in every aspect. But I cannot do that. Those final episodes surprised me, entertained me to some degree, and gave me a little spark of hope. Much is lost already, but maybe some quality still can be preserved. Maybe it was just an accident. Maybe it will be just more of the worst that we have seen in this season. Maybe it will be just even more boring and stupid. Or maybe there will be some changes for the better. Will it be so? We can only hope. And so ends our adventure with the 3rd season of The Witcher. I thank everyone who joined me on this journey. I thank you for your subscriptions and comments. I hope to see you again very soon. Fare you well, Nova Year.
Subscribe right now, you little hobbitses.